Now I'm the gal that's chasing you up, really flip my lid. Come here, eager beaver, baby. Eager beaver, baby. Eager beaver, baby. Eager beaver, well, what are you gonna do? This eager beaver, baby of mine. I'm all there beside you, no matter where you stop. Welcome back to Was That an Orgy? Yeah! The beautiful, illustrious, perverted, ethical slut Shar is not feeling well today, so she's going to be zooming in. Hopefully, if you're watching, you can see her, and we'll be able to hear her. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. This is a first. And today on our show, we have our lovely guest Shar. I'll let you introduce him so we can see how it's working.
Today we have David Levine, thespian and author, here to talk to us about bisexuality and the spectrum. I almost said speculum of attraction and gender. If you want to talk about the speculum as well, welcome, David.
There you go.
There we go. Yes, welcome, David. Hi. So I'll be, if you don't mind, before we even get started, I was hoping you could simultaneously school me. I kind of represent the more innocently ignorant demographic, you know, so Shar's the pro, and I am her sort of like I live under a rock, innocently ignorant, a little sister. And so I was hoping you could school me and whatever part of the public that is as ignorant as I on a few terms before we go into it, because there's a whole, you know, vocabulary.
Okay, so when a mommy and a mommy love each other very much.
Go on. Okay. Is there a picture book to this?
There is. I mean, there's entire stores in San Francisco full of picture books about this.
That's great. I'd love to see one. So one of the things that's been intimidating me is, in my ignorance is, you know, I memorized the LGBT, and then even so, you know, ADD poster child here, I thought we had a different guest coming until last night. And so as we were texting, me and Char late into the night, and she was like, no, it's this guy. Don't you read the notes? And I went, oh, shit. And so then I started kind of just, you know, looking around online for things. And I noticed that the LGBT sort of initialism has turned into LGBTQQIAAP. And I just about fainted.
There should be a number 2 in there as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy. Is that the most current, politically correct and sensitive, you know, term that we should all be using and memorizing? Or is, you know, are people just still saying LGBT?
A lot of people still are.
Okay.
I myself am quite fond of the word quilt bag.
Which
puts many of the letters, if not all of them, together into a word that you can actually pronounce.
That's cool.
Yeah. And you know, we have to acknowledge that there's, I mean, gender and sexuality is a huge, messy thing because it's people, right?
Yeah.
Everything having to do with people is huge and messy.
Yeah, it's true.
And so gender and sexuality is a huge, messy thing that every time you look at it, it's grown another complication on one side, right? So, you know, I think in recent years we've become a lot more cognizant of how messy gender and sexuality are, and a lot more willing to acknowledge that things are more complicated than they looked at first glance. And so if you say LGBT, you'll often see LGBT plus or LGBT asterisk, meaning lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and all those other ones. Yeah. And it can be kind of dismissive to do it that way, but it's better to at least put in that plus or that asterisk, indicating that you acknowledge that there's more to it than that.
Definitely, because then it helps people like me who just, you know, again, ADD poster child, like, I just was trying to figure out how am I going to memorize that, but I really love quilt bag. Is that's something you came up with, or is that?
No, it's been kicking around for years.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I can remember quilt bag.
Yeah. So the Q can be either queer or questioning. The U is, and I think maybe uncertain. I for intersex, L for lesbian, T trans, B bisexual, A for asexual or asexual, agender, aromantic, and G for gay. And so that you know, that brings in more things than just LGBT, while still recognizing. I mean, one of the more recent additions is the 2 for Two Spirit, and Two Spirit is a Native American concept, which isn't gay, it isn't trans. It's something different. That's why it has its own name. And it's got cultural dimensions. I mean, everything having to do with gender and sexuality has cultural cultural dimensions.
Yeah.
So, so recognize that there's probably more to it than you recognize, no matter how much you know.
Yeah, right. And it's ever expanding. What is it called again? The native, did you say it's 2A or
Two spirits?
Two spirits.
Right.
Okay.
So
right.
I've seen it included in the acronym as either just the number 2, short for two spirits, or also sometimes 2S.
Yeah. In a sociology class I took once, I remember them saying that in these the people that they call the two spirits would oftentimes actually, instead of being victims of prejudice, that they would get special positions in spiritual ceremonies and stuff like that. And that really struck me.
Yeah, being two-spirit it's not just a sex thing, it's not just a gender thing, it's not just a spirituality thing. It's all of them. And I am not qualified to discuss this.
Yeah, right. Okay. Moving along. Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple other things too, just for people listening, that I thought it would be nice to clarify, because I think they can be confusing, and the difference, or if there is one, between bisexuality and pansexuality.
Okay. So I use the term bisexuality to describe myself. I use the term bisexual to describe myself, largely for historical reasons.
Okay.
You know, that I've been an out bisexual for running up on 30 years now. Okay. And so the difference between bisexuality and pansexuality, and believe me, you can't bring this up in queer spaces without getting somebody to argue with whatever it is that you say.
Yeah.
Because there's no, I mean, you know, 2 queers, 5 opinions. But if you, I think my personal interpretation is that bisexuality is the older term, and it describes being attracted to both genders.
Right.
Okay. And now that we understand that gender is a spectrum and there's more than 2, there's in effect there's an infinite number, that we use the term pansexuality to indicate inclusivity. You know, that I'm attracted not just to 2 genders, but to all the genders.
Right. And you can be a non-binary identifying person and
still have multiple attractions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You can also be a non-binary or agender person who is attracted to only one gender. You know, you may be a non-binary person who only dates guys. And I've known people who identify as both non-binary and gay or lesbian, and that is something that is not something I'm going to try to explain for them.
Yeah.
But it works for them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So so attraction, when you're talking about, whether we're talking about heterosexuality, homosexuality, bisexuality, pansexuality, half of the equation is how you define yourself. Okay. So I personally define myself as cis male bisexual. But I use the term bisexual mostly, as I said, for historical reasons.
Ooh, and before you even go on, for the innocently ignorant, such as I, can you explain cis?
Cis means that you are happy in the gender that you were originally assigned.
Okay.
So cis and trans. A cis person is a male or female person who is happy being male or female, as it were.
Gotcha.
Whereas a trans person is somebody who is not happy with the gender they were originally defined, and may or may not have taken some actions in order to make changes.
Thank you.
Okay. So I was born a boy. I'm still a boy. I'm happy being a boy. And it's funny how when we're talking about sex, which is the thing for adults, we will often fall back into using the terms boy and girl. But that's a whole separate.
Yeah.
Now, some people have tried to say, when I say bisexual, I mean my gender and other genders. You know, so I'm still talking about 2, but not necessarily claiming that the big 2 genders are the only 2.
Right.
That's something that's been kind of tacked on to the term later on, and a lot of people don't quite buy it. I don't quite buy it. So I use the term bisexual. A lot of the reason I use it is because a lot more people understand it.
Right.
I don't have. If I say, well, I'm bisexual, then most people will understand. Even people who are not, active in the sex positive scene will understand what I mean when I say by that.
Right.
Whereas if I say pansexual, then some people will say, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I often will joke that I'm pansexual because I enjoy cooking for my lovers.
Uh-huh.
That's a whole separate show. Yeah. But I'm, I am pansexual. I have been attracted to sex with people of all kinds of genders.
Mhm.
That there are, I've had lovers who are trans masculine, trans feminine,
Mhm.
non-agender, and everybody brings their own special energy to the table.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that I get out of being sexually attracted to people of many different genders is I have many different kinds of experiences, both physically and energetically.
Yeah. I'm curious, you might not know this, but or know the answer, but when I was younger and I first heard the term pansexual, I thought that just meant everything. Do you think that the definition has changed over time, or can you even speak to that? Because I thought it just meant animal, vegetable, mineral. I'm just sexual, baby.
Yeah. Well, I have known people who, when asked to define their sexuality, say, "I'm just sexual."
Uh-huh.
Okay. I think that most people, most of the time, when they use the term pansexual, do not mean I am sexually attracted to rocks and lichens.
Yeah.
There are people who are attracted to rocks and lichens,
Right.
but I think that's beyond what we usually call pansexuality.
Yeah. And balloons. I heard that one recently.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. It's all out there.
Okay. And when you talk about having sexual attractions to things that are not capable of giving consent, inanimate objects, animals, children, okay, those are often referred to as paraphilias, which is, and paraphilia is kind of a psychological technical term for what other people would call not my kink.
Yeah.
So
not necessarily deviant even, but just not my kink.
Yeah.
I want to type that. I want to remember that. Paraphilia. Write it down, Char.
P-A-R-A-H-I-L-I-A.
Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one goes back to
I'm a terrible
Freud.
speller. Interesting. Okay. And then, so I think you covered non-binary.
I didn't define it. Non-binary.
Oh, okay.
Non-binary is anybody that doesn't consider themselves to be specifically either male or female.
Okay. And then another term that was coming up was monosexual.
I use the term monosexual to refer to people who are only attracted to one gender.
Oh, okay.
So you can have heterosexual monosexuals. You can have heterosexual. You can have homosexual monosexuals.
I see.
So, for example, a cis guy who's only attracted to cis guys, period, I would describe as a monosexual. The term monosexual, I think, is often used in a slightly derogatory way.
Oh,
it's like,
okay.
I feel so sorry for those monosexuals who are so closed-minded and not open to having interesting sexual experiences.
Right.
But that but you can. I mean, some people consider cis a slur. Some people consider trans a slur. Some people consider monosexual a slur. Certainly, when many people say homosexual, that's definitely intended as a slur.
Well, and that's another. I'm glad you said that, because that was one of the things I was wondering as I was, looking around online last night. Is homosexual an outdated term now? Because I'm not seeing it.
I would say that generally speaking, people who use the term homosexual are a bit out of step with current culture.
Okay.
Which is not to say, and the thing is, of course, is that queers can talk about the homosexual agenda. I mean, everybody knows what the homosexual agenda is. It's sleep until 10, coffee. Check your email.
Taco Tuesday. Don't forget Taco Tuesday. That's
and so when we use that term, we're deliberately referring to something that, I mean, the term homosexual agenda, I think, has not really been part of the culture war since the 70s. So, but just because homosexual is no longer au courant doesn't mean that it's not true that everybody knows what it means.
And now I need another definition for au courant.
Au courant. That's just French. That means current.
Oh,
yeah.
How we do things.
It's a sexy way of saying.
It's a sexy way of saying.
I like it.
It means raisin.
Raisin.
Yeah,
it's about raisins.
And then
not that kind of currants.
I read this too online last night, and then I swear I'm just gonna let you talk. But I thought this was kind of beautiful. I'm trying to remember where this came from. Oh, it said it's the Bisexual Manifesto of 1990. Have you heard of this?
I have, yes.
And it says bisexuality is a whole fluid identity. In fact, don't assume that there are only two genders. The manifesto said, do not mistake, sorry, 3 hours of sleep. Do not mistake our fluidity for confusion, irresponsibility, or inability to commit. Do not equate promiscuity, infidelity, or unsafe sexual behavior with bisexuality. And I was like, bravo,
That's all true.
1990.
I read a great thing on Twitter within the past week or so. Somebody says, so when the moon is full, you turn into a werewolf? No. When the moon is full, I'm a werewolf. I take my wolf form. When the moon is not full, I'm a werewolf. I take a human form. But I'm still a werewolf no matter what phase the moon is in. And that's what bisexuality is.
I like it.
It doesn't matter who I'm sleeping with at any particular moment.
Yeah.
I'm still a bisexual. I could be a bisexual if I was in a committed monogamous relationship with one person of one gender.
Mhm.
I could be a bisexual if I was completely celibate.
Mhm.
I could be a bisexual if I was sleeping with 5 people at once.
Mhm.
That bisexuality is about attraction
Mhm.
and openness to the concept of sexual activity with, rather than your current activity, your current level of activity, or who you happen to be buffing at the moment. When you mentioned the bisexual agenda, I happen to remember that I am indeed a card carrying bisexual. I've been carrying this card in my wallet since 1996.
Does it say anything on it?
It says anything that moves. So this card was issued by anything that moves, the magazine for bisexuals.
That's
Oh my
great.
And of course,
God.
like an awful lot of printed magazines, it's no longer published, but it is. But I still have the card.
Well, you know what this segues very nicely into is one of the things, as I was tootling around, the Kinsey scale is something I never had heard of until last night. And I'm
Really?
Yeah, I know. Live under a rock, like I said.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, so you're familiar with it.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Okay. So the Kinsey scale is so this was made up by sex researcher Alfred Kinsey back in the 50s, I think, 50s or early 60s. The Kinsey scale is a number of from 0 to 6, where 0 indicates no sexual activity, no sexual attraction to the same gender at all, and 6 indicates exclusive sexual attraction to the same gender. Okay. So this is why, for example, there's a singing, an a cappella singing group of gay men called the Kinsey Six, SICKS. So that's why they're called that, Kinsey Six, meaning exclusively homosexual. But ever since the invention of the Kinsey scale, and of course, once you have that concept, it becomes obvious how you use it in everyday life. You might say, "Oh, I'm a Kinsey. I'm a Kinsey too. I'm mostly attracted to people of the opposite gender, and somewhat attracted to people of my same gender."
Yeah.
But the Kinsey scale is a gross oversimplification of the complexity of human sexuality. Somebody else came along about 20 years ago now, somebody by the name of Klein invented what he called the Klein grid, which puts the Kinsey scale on 2 or possibly 3 axes, where one axis is your current level of attraction, one is your past level of attraction, and another axis is your activity. So you would quote rather than just 1 point on a 0 to 6, you'd quote your orientation on the Klein grid as being a point in 3 space.
That is so cool.
A 3-dimensional.
Can you give me the name of that again? Because I want to put it as a link in our
Klein,
podcast.
Klein, Klein grid.
Here, I'm sending it.
Oh, good.
Sweet.
Way to go,
Yeah,
Shirley. She's on it.
Okay. And
I just sent it in a private chat. I can't send it. I can't post it for everyone to see, but it's in a private chat.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
We'll get it out to you. I personally, this is a thing that I have meant to make for myself for years, and I've never gotten around to it. I want to make a pin that shows a meter. Okay. And it's a meter like an empty full meter labeled 0 to 6, and at the top it says Kinsey. And then in front of the meter is a needle which is attached to a spring. So as I walk around, the spring is going blah, 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 blah. So that's my Kinsey number.
Yeah, right. I do what I want when I want. I do who I want when I want.
Pretty much,
That's
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I find that I'm most attracted to whatever it is that I'm not getting at the moment.
The ass is always greener on the other side.
The ass is indeed always green. If you like them green, that's your
right.
thing, not mine. But I consider that your Kinsey number. Okay, so forget about all that about multidimensional sexuality, and
Right.
just think about the Kinsey scale as a simple number 0 to 6.
Okay.
You know, how attracted to same-sex encounters are you right now? Okay,
Mhm.
and then I consider that everybody has their Kinsey number at the moment,
Mhm.
and also they have your gray area around that. It's
Mhm.
like I might be, you know, a solid Kinsey 6. You know, I've only ever been ever since I was a wee lad. I was only attracted to boys. I've never felt the slightest amount of attraction to a female person at all. I'm a
Mhm.
boy. I'm only interested in boys. That's never changed through my entire life. So you might call that a solid 6.
Mhm.
Or you could say, well, you know, I used to only be attracted to women, but I've become more and more attracted to men as time goes on. So if you can just sort of visualize that for a moment, you might see a point with a kind of a tail
Mhm.
indicating that my current sexuality is here, and then there's a tail of previous sexualities that have been left behind.
Yeah.
There's also the concept that my current sexuality might be here, and then there's this gray area on either side of it. And I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
it's often said that everybody's bisexual, and I don't think that's quite true. I think there are some people that are pretty firmly attached to one kind of attraction or another.
Mhm.
But I think more people are more able to be attracted to different genders than they thought they were, than they think they are. So I think there's more wiggle room, there's more gray area in most people's sexuality than they have. I definitely became bisexual rather than realizing I was bisexual. I mean,
Mm.
I did have a moment of realization, and sadly it wasn't until I was 37.
Mhm.
I didn't twig to my same sex attraction until I was 37. But at that point, I realized that I had a choice. I said, I've recognized this attraction in myself. I've been a happily married, monogamous, heterosexual for my entire life until up until now, and I could keep doing that,
Mhm.
or I could choose to explore this aspect of my sexuality.
Mhm.
And so I discovered that I had more variability than I had
Mhm.
initially thought.
Yeah.
So this kind of a, you know, in a mathematical terms, is first and second derivatives. There's what's your current sexuality? How much variability is there in it, and how much has the variability changed over time?
Mhm.
Like you know, you might start out as being, oh well, I'm heterosexual, and then you might realize, well, actually I might be open to homosexual activity with the right person under certain circumstances.
Right.
And then by the you know 5 years later, you find yourself a you know full-time bisexual slut.
Yeah.
So people's sexuality can, and that certainly has been my personal path.
Mhm.
So
Wonderful.
people's sexuality can certainly change, and to some extent, it's inborn and unconscious, and to some extent, it's conscious.
Yeah.
I believe that people can choose to explore and
Yeah.
examine their sexuality, or people can choose to say, well, you know, I could be gay, but it looks like a lot of work, so I'll pass.
Mhm. Right, right, right.
And it is a lot of work, no question.
Yeah, and we can only
Yeah.
kind of project, our own sort of experience of it too. Like there might be some people that are, it's excruciatingly painful to have to deny that. And then there are people like, I kind of identify more with you where I never had feelings or fantasies about women, but then, little experiences started happening and then I found myself open to it and enjoying it. And so, I guess I'd probably be now let me think about this. Wait, on the Kinsey scale, I might have it reversed. A
It's
6 is not at all.
six is completely queer, 0 is completely straight.
Okay, okay. So I'm probably like a 2 or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. But,
Yeah.
oh gosh, you said something else a while ago. Now what was it? Twig. Is that an erection like reference or what is that?
Twig. Oh, when
Yeah.
I said that I twigged to it.
Yeah.
I became aware of it.
Oh, okay, okay. New term for me.
Okay, sorry. I think
I like it. I like it. You're
probably
schooling me, honey. You're
it's probably
schooling me.
British. I was raised on a diet of British comedies.
Wonderful. I
Yeah.
like it.
Nice.
You.
Yeah, no, twig is not an erection thing.
And so I did catch on. There was a couple other things too where I was like, "Ooh, inquiring minds want to know."
Yes.
And let me know too if you're like, "Enough! I got something I want to say."
I'm here to talk about gay sex or
Yay!
bisex. So
Woo!
yeah,
You're in the right place.
excellent.
So I was just curious so your marriage survived that?
Yes.
Amazing. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I came out to myself at age 37. I immediately came out to my wife, and I did the happily married monogamous bisexual thing for about 3 years. We were hanging out with a lot of polyamorous people. These are people who have romantic and sexual interactions with more than one other person at a time.
Yeah.
So we were a lot of our friends were poly, and so we went to a party where almost everybody was poly, and one of the other people at the party assumed that well we were there, and so she hit on me, and
pardon me,
and my wife and I took this opportunity to say, hey, is this something that we want to try out?
Right.
And we both figured that if we opened up our relationship and started to be poly, that I would be sleeping mostly with guys. It didn't turn out that way. So we had, what we did our research, we read the books, we talked to their poly friends, and we decided, yes, this is a thing we were willing to try out. And we had a very short list of rules. And I have since learned that putting on too many rules is a good way to make poly not work. We had a very short list of rules, one of which was, if it stops being fun, we're going to stop doing it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So we had a perfectly functional poly relationship for about 20 years. Until she passed away 5 years ago.
So, I'm so sorry.
Well, being poly really helped, honestly.
Nice.
I mean,
helped you recover?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it helped me get through it, because I had a whole poly community to help support me through that.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah, and help me recover as well. And Sex Positive Portland, which I'm sure your listeners have already heard about, was a very important part of my grieving and coming back to real life process.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So no, brain cancer, do not recommend. 0 stars.
Oh, so sorry.
But yeah, no. And it's just part of life.
Yeah, it's true. Death's a part of life.
Yeah. And so, one thing that I learned out of this is, if you're thinking that you might want to try, skydiving or buggery or having a nice 3, 4, 5 way, hey, life is short.
Yes,
go for it.
I agree. It's precious. It's short. It can be delicious. Taste the 31 flavors.
Yes.
That's what I say. Yeah, I like it. Lick them all.
Lick them all.
One at a time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just put a link in for Sex Positive Portland. So there you go.
So I'm also curious too, because you mentioned it, and again, just anytime you feel like I want to talk about this, but you mentioned that you came out. I'm just curious. Does that mean you came out to your family and you're out with it?
Right.
Like
coming out is a continuous process.
Okay.
It's never over.
Mm-hmm.
Most coming out stories have a beginning, but you're always going to be coming out until the day you die. And for some historical figures, it doesn't even stop there. So in my case, coming out to myself was the first and hardest part of the process. It was recognizing and kind of putting a name on. I use the term claiming the rainbow. Recognizing and taking possession of something that had been there all along. As a originally mostly heterosexual, bisexual, it was easier for me to put those same-sex attractions aside because there's so much societal pressure pushing us in the direction of being normal and boring and heterosexual.
Right.
Okay, so it was easier as somebody who was capable of heterosexual attraction. It was easy for me to stick with it, and that's why I believe that more people are more capable of same-sex behavior than they think. Okay. So then the first thing I did as soon as I realized it about myself was I came out to my wife. It wasn't a complete surprise because very, very often people who come out, it's more obvious to other people than it was to them.
Yeah.
John came out, it's like, oh, honey, where have you been all this time?
Right.
Okay. And then, so then there's the question of, do you come out to your siblings? Do you come out to your parents? Do you come out to your coworkers?
Yeah.
And I've been, generally speaking, more private it's easier to come out to new people in new situations that I never bothered telling my coworkers that I was bi because it didn't really affect it.
Yeah.
They didn't have to know. But the thing is that if something came up that required it to be placed on the table, then I would place it on the table. And it's important that when you do that sort of thing, you put it down as a fact, not a secret. That it's part of our job as queer people to support other queer people by being as out as we are comfortable with. And so you know that just stating the facts of our same-sex attraction is part of normalizing it, which makes everybody safer.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
point.
this is not just a thing about keeping queer people safe, because there are tons of completely straight people who have been beat up or killed for looking too queer.
Right. So
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so this is a matter of community safety for all of us. So anyway,
Good point.
so like in some ways I never really came out to my dad. It's kind of something that I mean I've been more willing to admit my same-sex attraction to my dad, to the fact that I have, a lot of boyfriends and girlfriends at once, because it's complicated.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But in general, I'm fairly open about it, and I don't have I have plenty of close friends and lovers who are, they're in politics, they're teachers, they have a security clearance where they simply cannot be out.
Yeah.
And so I think I think everybody should be as out as they are comfortable with.
Yeah.
Nobody should be forced out of the closet. And nobody should be forced into the closet either.
Right.
I think people should be allowed to control. They should be allowed to control their own private information.
I agree. That's one of the things I come back to a lot of the time, is that it comes down to, your motivation, your agenda, your priority. Because the other thing that I come back to over and over again about this issue of like sexual orientation is like, to me, it's none of anyone's business what anyone is doing with their, genitals, their love, whatever. I just wish it was a non-issue in general, but people make it an issue. And that's one of the things that offends me when I watch, things, people being outed, against their own consent, in media and things like that, is that it's just reminds me of the Roman Colosseums, where it's none of anyone's business.
Yeah. Well, okay. Everything having to do with human sexuality is something that people are going to really get their emotions in an uproar about, because sexuality is something that's buried very deep in our brains. I mean, that the human brain has there's the oldest structure that's responsible for things like heartbeat and breathing, and then there's a less old structure that's involved with like moving around consciously, and then there's another structure which carries our emotions and deals with sense of smell and memory, and then there's the neocortex, the newest part of the brain, which is responsible for conscious thought and language. Okay, so because we've been sexual creatures for a long, long time evolutionarily, everything having to do with sex is closely associated with smell, memory, emotion. It hits us at a very, very deep basal level. And so of course people are going to get very, very intense about it, emotionally speaking.
That does. That makes sense. Well said. Good memory recall for all that.
I have a theory about why there exists so much extremely virulent homophobia in this culture. That I believe that a lot of people who are saying loudly that homosexuality needs to be punished, that homosexuals need to be kept out of the public sphere, that homosexuality cannot be allowed to strut itself, to strut its stuff in the street.
Yeah, it's deviant.
I believe that a lot of these people are actually self-hating, closeted queers.
Oh, high five, get down. Okay. Oh my God.
Because the thing is that if you are a Kinsey 6 trapped in a trapped in an evangelical's body, okay, so if you are a leader, in a political leader, a church leader who is a Kinsey 6, who feels that overwhelming attraction to your own gender and feels, for example, maybe no attraction or little attraction to the opposite gender, your body, yourself, is telling you something that is completely at war with your mind.
Yes.
And I believe that many of these people believe that everyone's like that. They believe that everybody has this incredibly strong same-sex attraction, which, if it were allowed to rampage unrestricted, would mean the end of the human race.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they feel that they need society's help to keep from giving in to those sinful impulses.
Yeah.
And they believe that everybody is in that same boat.
Yeah.
They lack empathy and self-awareness to the extent that they don't understand that if we let queer people do whatever the queer people wanted, there would still be plenty of babies.
It's true.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of something I came up with once in thinking about that, which is, I think that this, the homophobic hate crimes have to do with exactly what you're saying. And what they're trying to do essentially is they're trying to destroy outside of them that which they can't destroy inside of them.
Yes.
They're threatened by it. So, hence the nihilism.
So I'd like to talk about what I get out of pansexuality.
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I find that my interactions with people of different genders are very different experiences. It's like they say about the mounds. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't.
Quite literally.
And it's like sometimes you want to ride a roller coaster, and sometimes you want a massage. Okay? And a massage is a wonderful experience. And riding a roller coaster is also a wonderful experience. But they're very different experiences. And you don't necessarily, you can't fulfill your roller coaster need by getting a massage, and you can't fulfill your massage need by going on a roller coaster. And many people are not attracted to roller coasters at all. I sometimes, I had a fabulous date with a new fella a little while ago. And I came out of that going, that was an amazing experience. And for some people, that would be literal hell. What I just did voluntarily and with great enthusiasm is something that for an awful lot of people is something that they simply couldn't picture themselves doing. And it's that difference, the fact that I'm incredibly attracted to something that another person would consider literal hell is part of the great depth and breadth of the human experience. That we all want different things, we all need different things. And that's one of the great things about being attracted to different genders is you get to have different kinds of experiences with different people. I find that I am a different person when I'm in bed with a cis man than I am with a cis woman. And I'm yet a different person when I'm in bed with a trans man. Trans men have a really interesting energy. I think that trans men and trans women both have an energy. And of course, I think there's maybe more variation from one trans person to another than there is between one cis male and another cis male person. But there's huge variation among all people, no matter what their current gender identification is. But I find that when I'm with cis men, I become more accepting. I become more touch focused. I become more willing to let the other person drive. And whereas when I'm with a cis woman, I find myself more attracted to driving. And I'm using the term drive meaning to take more control of the interaction. Okay. But I find that my my gay slutty self and my straight slutty self want different things, seek out different kinds of partners, seek out different kinds of activities. And so when you throw genders other than the big two into the mix, then you have still more opportunities. I love the combination of male and female energy that I find, especially in trans men, to a lesser extent in trans women, but trans women also have a really intriguing combination of energies. Okay, I'm a sci-fi geek. Okay. And there is in science fiction fandom a thing called Slash. Slash, the original, the earliest Slash was K/S, Kirk/Spock, meaning writing slutty little stories about Kirk and Spock getting it on.
I love
Oh
it.
my God, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
This has existed since the 60s, okay? And probably much and the thing is Slash has hugely expanded. There are libraries full of Harry/Snape/. There are every pairing you could possibly imagine, and quite a few that you could not, of any two fictional characters, not necessarily from the same universe. Okay, so Slash, in the earlier days, when I first became aware of it in the 1970s, that most Slash fiction, and there was Kirk/Spock, there was Starsky/Hutch.
Shar, are you writing this down, by the way? Because we have to.
Oh, so I don't think I need to. I'm already thinking like, Batman/Robin. There's gotta be all those things. I'm looking this up.
Batman/Robin is practically canonical. Canonical meaning actually in the source text. But in the 70s, most Slash fiction about gay relationships between male fictional characters was being written by straight females who had no idea whatsoever about what gay men do together. It was pretty freaking hilarious.
Oh, I bet that was the best.
Okay, and this is before the internet,
having
right?
Pillow fights or something.
Right.
There was a lot of really stupid misinformation out there, and so the thing is, of course, is that I think more people are queer now than were then. There's a lot more information available online. And it's easier for people, even if people are not willing to trust the information they get online, and God knows I wouldn't trust anything I read online. Never trust a podcast.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I am lying. I am lying right now. But the thing is that the reason I felt that these straight women were writing these sex fantasies about male characters was because they wanted to experience vicariously through fiction. They wanted to experience sexuality without the power imbalance.
Ooh, that is so good. Yes, and
I
experience also, I want to add to that and say it's experiencing men in a different way, and you're right, it's without that. And that's one of the reasons, like, gay porn, male gay porn is my favorite. And it's because of that. There isn't that power imbalance, and you get to sort of see and experience a different aspect of men that I find really hot.
Yeah. And the thing is that in relationships that are not inside the conventional gender binary, you start to see interesting plays of how do we do sex without having to negotiate the usual power dynamic.
Right.
And it's so much hotter. And guys, okay, suck dick, you'll get more pussy.
Interesting.
You know what? To take us back to the name of the show, a person who is into sucking dick and eating pussy is gonna be a lot busier at an orgy. Like, that's for sure. You're like,
I thought you were going to say a bivalve, but
are you calling me a
bivalve? Are you calling me a bivalve?
You're an octopus.
Is it because you're looking at this gooey duck behind me that's on the wall?
That's it. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I distracted you, Shar.
But the thing is now here's an interesting thing. We have, mainstream culture. You're soaking in it. Mainstream culture has a lot more acceptance of female bisexuality than male bisexuality.
Absolutely.
Okay? In mainstream culture, you're going to see a lot more porn featuring two women getting it on while one guy watches, than vice versa.
Yeah.
And so even in swing culture, and my personal definition of the difference between swing and poly is that swing is basically right-wing non-monogamy and poly is basically left-wing non-monogamy. It's a lot more complicated than that. But in general,
I never heard that, but that's hilarious.
Accepts more mainstream ideas about gender and sexuality than polyculture does. Polyculture seems to me to be more willing to question the gender binary. Swing culture, although it's non-monogamous, is more accepting of mainstream concepts of the gender binary. So in swing culture, it is almost never the case that the guys will play with each other even if they happen to be in the same bed naked.
Right.
You know,
Oh
a
yeah.
very typical swing situation is 2 men and 2 women in a bed. The women are getting it on, the men get it on with the women, but the
Mhm.
men do not even touch.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so even in sex positive culture, even in polyculture, because we are unable to completely escape mainstream culture, I find that there's a lot more acceptance, even acceptance, celebration, expectation of female bisexuality than there is of male bisexuality.
Right.
You know,
Right.
as
Yeah.
as a male bisexual in a sex positive, large group, many people having sex in the room, I will very, very often I look around and see myself as the only guy doing anything sexual with another guy. You know,
Mm.
Mhm.
there are not a lot of bisexuals in the sex positive spaces that I've been in. And
Mm.
so, and the thing is that bisexuals are kind of on the outside, both in multigender sex positive spaces and also in gay male sex positive spaces.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
Right.
that I have had guys turn me down for a date specifically because I was bisexual.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
there's this attitude of, well, eventually he'll find some woman and of course he'll run off with her because they're more because
Yeah.
because
Right.
it's easier. It's
Yeah.
so much easier to be in a straight appearing relationship. And
Yeah.
I've been in many
Mhm.
straight appearing relationships where both of us were bi or some form of queer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a straight appearing relationship, it's got a gravitic attraction that
Mhm.
if you look like a straight couple, everybody will treat you as a straight couple. And
Mhm.
Mhm.
you should totally get Erica Moen and her partner Matthew Nolan,
Mhm.
creators of Oh Joy Sex Toy,
Mhm.
which is a web comic of
Oh
sex
yeah.
education and sex toy reviews.
Mm.
They're here in Portland.
A web comic?
A web comic, yeah.
Okay.
They do sex toy reviews and sex education in comics form. 3
Oh,
new comics a
cool.
week, and
Wow.
they've done like 6 collections and 3 books of educational comics intended for young people. You should totally get them on this show.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Shall
Oh,
I write this
cool.
down again, right?
yeah. Erica
I
Moen
am. I'm
Yeah.
looking up Ojoy
Great.
Sex
Cool.
Toy.
ojoysextoy.com. I
Here we
highly
go.
recommend it.
It's coming your way.
Yeah.
Well, you made me think of something I thought of before, where these different sort of like classifications can like ah boy, I'm trying to put it all in. I know we don't have not much time left,
Mhm.
but it's like I do feel like everyone's kind of like on a spectrum, whether they're like a 6 or a 0. I still feel like everyone's on this spectrum, and that I'm suspicious that a lot of people feel like they need to choose, either being like gay or straight a lot of the time, because there's something about the subcultures there that are, exclusive
Yes.
and threatened by, someone being with the opposite sex that they're not attracted to. And it reminds me of a time I even was, when I was younger, I worked in spas, and after work one day, me and a friend and a gay gentleman, we went to the Silverado, and he got drunk and got frisky and started making out with my lady friend, and the bartender actually slapped him in the face. And I was so shocked.
God.
Like, he was like disgusted that he would like kiss a woman. And hopefully we've come a long way, baby. I'm not old,
Yeah.
but I wonder too, like some of my gay friends have told me that actually every gay male friend I've had said that they do feel attracted to women sometimes, and sometimes they wish they could kind of get away with exploring that a little bit. But one of the things that holds them back is that because of the depth of intimacy that, like, for instance, I have with my gay boyfriends, they're afraid that if they express the breadth of their feelings, that we're going to then start to feel threatened by them, by their
Or
sexuality.
Right. And that,
or
of course, is one of the many negative effects of toxic masculinity.
Hmm.
We're all subject to the effects of toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is as harmful to men as it is to anybody.
Yeah. Well, and I was even thinking, though, I bet being, coming out bisexual, then, it's you're dealing with that too,
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
same way. So you're a threat to everybody.
I am a threat to everybody. It's
So
true.
threatening.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, look at me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm no threat.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is that coming out is really painful. And the more invested you are in your current sexual identity, the more painful it is.
Mm-hmm.
That obviously, if you are in mainstream culture, or even worse, in the more conservative side of mainstream culture, acknowledging that you yourself have same-sex attraction really cannot be done without questioning your whole worldview. And there's an
Yeah.
awful lot of people who have come out and then almost immediately left their church, left their conservative community, left their family, or been kicked out of church, community, and family because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because cultures, again, as I said, sexuality is something that hits us at a very deep and emotional level, which is why there's a lot of rules around sexuality and sexual expression. So this is why many cultures feel that they have to enforce rules around sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
which means that when if you suddenly realize that you yourself have a forbidden attraction,
Mm-hmm.
you may be forced to choose between what your body is telling you and what your brain and your family and your community and your church are telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And an awful lot of people will choose to remain closeted and be miserable for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And on the other hand, your choice may be to accept what your body is telling you and give up on the community and your relatives and all of your friends and move to San Francisco. There's a reason that young gay people move to big cities, because big cities are where people tend to crowd together in large numbers and are therefore places where people who are comfortable with being cheek by jowl with people who are different from themselves will tend to migrate to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about
the whole hanky thing, by the way? So you may or may not know, this is not nearly as much of a thing today as it was in the
I remember
60s
the
and
hanky
70s.
thing. Yeah.
Okay, so the idea is that a gay man will wear a colored hanky sticking out of one of his back pockets, indicating left or right, indicating top or bottom, and the color indicating what particular sexual activity he's looking for at that time. When the hanky code first started out, left and right were swapped from the East Coast to the West Coast, and this led to much of that. So that the whole hanky code isn't much of a thing anymore. But the hanky code actually originated during the gold rush, when you had all these gold rush prospectors, almost all men. And what do you do for it's 1849? What do you do for fun? You go to a square dance, okay?
Yeah.
So there was this thing of you would put a hanky in your pocket, indicating whether you were dancing the boy or the girl part, because everybody there was they were all men, okay? And so that concept of girl on the right eventually evolved into the hanky code.
Interesting. Now, I might regret saying this, but I heard somewhere too that that's where the low riding jeans came from as well, like the below the butt.
My understanding of the below the butt fashion has to do with prison culture.
Right, that's what I heard too.
So the below the butt thing came to mainstream culture through Black prison culture.
Yeah, that's what I heard too, and I'm
afraid to even
I'm
not qualified to speak on it anymore.
Me neither. Yeah.
I want to butt in with something like, I think when we're talking about bisexuality a lot and sexual attraction, I think there's also a big component of, the romantic attraction. And so that's something that is like a totally other part of it. And so I think, a lot of people when they're considering themselves bisexual are maybe thinking about it in a sexual sort of play way. I think that's a lot of what, when we're saying like, oh yeah, women being bisexual is more widely accepted, I think it's because, oh yeah, we do this and it's fun but no one expects the women to fall in love with each other. But that's another part of it that can be unexpected for a bisexual person, can be something that is like, it's this other thing that happens where it's like, yeah, you have your sexual attraction and there's your romantic attraction. Right. And sometimes those run at different levels. Sometimes you might be more romantically geared toward one more masculine or feminine side. But that's kind of another thing. So, David, do you find yourself also romantically attracted to both, or do you find that there's kind of a difference in your romantic versus sexual attraction?
Definitely a difference for me. okay, so if you imagine, okay, you got your Kinsey scale of 0. Zero is no same-sex attraction, to 6 is exclusively same-sex attraction. Okay, now imagine expanding that to 2 dimensions. You have your level of attraction, you have your axes of attraction, and then you have your intensity. That you may be much more attracted to opposite sex, but have you might, I mean, your graph on this 2-dimensional scale might be a saddle curve where you're strongly attracted to opposite sex and strongly attracted to same sex, but not so much in the middle. Then, okay, now we take this 2-dimensional representation and turn it into 3 dimensions where you have your level of sexual attraction. You also have your level of romantic attraction. So this leads to terms like, I'm bisexual but heteroromantic. Okay, I'm sexually attracted to all genders, but only romantically attracted to the quote unquote opposite gender.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's hetero, homo, bi, and then there's asexual, aromantic.
Yeah.
And then there's allosexual, which means having a conventional sexuality. So the opposite of asexual is not heterosexual. The opposite of asexual is allosexual. And there are heterosexual allosexuals and there are homosexual allosexuals. But the two of them together, people who have sexual attraction, are referred to as allosexual, as opposed to asexual.
Gotcha.
And then so you have aromantic, homoromantic, biromantic, heteroromantic, and alloromantic. And there's more. There's more than just. So people can totally say, I'm a cis female biromantic heterosexual. Or I'm a trans female aromantic monosexual.
I hope I'm not going to be tested on this later, David.
No,
oh my God.
And the thing is that when the test is presented, you will probably be drunk.
Yeah.
Right? So it will definitely be.
I'm trying right now. Actually,
because the testing.
We're getting on it.
Yeah, the testing spaces are generally open from about 6 p.m. till midnight.
I'll make sure I'm passed out in a blackout or something.
Yeah, no, and it's very important. Passing the test and passing out are 2 different things.
Yeah.
Do not try to do one when you should really be trying to do the other.
True that.
Yeah. So this shit's complicated. No question.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody has to find their own way through. And you ever have one of those things where you've gone to a conference at a big hotel, and by the time you finally figure out where everything is, it's time to go home? Okay.
Yes.
You think that life is like this?
By
the time you finally figure out where everything is, it's time to go.
Oh God!
And this isn't fair.
No.
But,
but
on the other hand, to put a more positive spin on it, you know how when you're looking for something, you always find it in the last place you look. Okay, so obviously that's because when you find it, you stop looking. Okay, so the same thing is that by the time you finally figure it out, that's time to go. Well, what that means is that life is so amazing and beautiful and complicated that you can never stop learning. You can never stop expanding and becoming a bigger and more interesting person.
Yeah, and that's why someone said youth is wasted on the young ones.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I was younger, I was so fucked up. And I even went through periods of severe depression, suicidal ideation. And the older I get, the more I find myself just loving life so much. And I feel like I'm just getting started. I don't want it to end. And yet middle age.
Don't let middle age.
That's amazing.
Oh, no, it just keeps getting better. I miss my collagen a little bit, gravity works, but I would take the jowls and the, deep nasal labial folds over the neuroses and, depression I had when I was younger any day.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I look at what 60-year-old me gets up to, 30-year-old me's head would fucking explode.
Oh, isn't so jealous, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, 30-year, never mind 20-year-old me. 20-year-old me would be, you what?
Yeah, totally. I had a squirrel where I was like, I wonder how many people know what nasal labial folds are.
I was just going to give you a segue, Teresa. Speaking of nasolabial folds, there are a bunch of labia on the screen that you have not addressed yet, and I'm sure people are saying, "What the hell are those things?" Could you explain that?
Yeah,
they're all redheads for one thing.
Yes, they are. Well, they're fashioned after me. I used a little hand mirror to make them. It's a character that I made up that I call Sasquatch, and I think it's funny. These are my pussy magnets. Let me see if I can pull one off and show you. See, magnets on the back. They're all handmade and hand painted by me. And despite how dinky they are, they each take about an hour. So charge like $25. They're on my Etsy site, which is called The Body Bawd.
I'll put up a link.
Yep, I've just been getting more fartistic during COVID because, bitch got to pay the bills somehow. And
that's right.
Up to there's lots of different pussy magnets on there as well.
So the podcast millions are not pouring in the way everybody's
not yet. Right now we're just paying. So feel
free,
everybody. And which reminds me, we will one day create a Patreon. So if people want
to
give us like $1 a month or something like that, get some sponsors and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I know, of all things, like I think we're kind of the worst at like trying to get money for this.
Oh yeah.
That's really it. We get so excited about the content. Yeah.
Typical creatives, story of our lives. Yeah. Well, I think is there anything else you would like to cover or say? Because, we are running a little over time, but that's okay. But just want to make sure that you feel complete. Take a minute.
I guess I would say that what I get out of sex with different genders is, every person is different, but the more different kinds of people you get jiggy with, the more different and interesting kinds of experiences you will have. I find myself that the afterglow after gay sex and the afterglow after straight sex and the afterglow after different kinds of sex with multiple people of multiple genders, they're all different experiences, and every bit of it is unique and worthwhile. And even if you have an experience that you decide later on you didn't like, hey, it's still a learning experience. So I would encourage everybody to put aside your fears and understand that, hey, it's just sex.
Get jiggy with it.
Get jiggy with it.
Yeah. And so we often ask people, like, have you been in a situation where you wondered, was that an orgy? And it sounds like you've been in a lot of situations where that was definitely an orgy.
Definitely, yeah.
We might have been in some of the same orgies.
Might possibly.
Oh my!
And the thing is that the reason we choose that basically you've got we don't use the term onesome, and we barely use the word twosome. Everybody knows what a threesome is. Everybody knows what a foursome is. The term fivesome doesn't really exist. So basically anything 5 and up is an orgy.
Okay, 5 and up. I wondered that. Yeah.
Now I personally, this is my own personal definition. If you go back to Roman times and you look at what they did, the thing that made an orgy was not the sex, but the food. The point of an orgy was to be an indulgence of all the senses. So I really believe that there's a difference between a sex party and an orgy. And a sex party has sex, and an orgy has sex and food.
All right. So from now on, if you want to have an orgy, you need an all-you-can-eat buffet and a vomitorium, right?
All right.
Keep going.
And plastic sheets.
Oh, that's
because
a great idea.
The food, if you're going to get food and sex together, get some,
Yeah, and it is true that most of the on-premises sex clubs that I've been to do have food. It's generally not very good food, but it is.
And hopefully it's not finger food.
Then and you have to.
It usually is, yeah.
In the naughty bits of the people you're playing with a little bit,
well, and the thing is, you have to know if you're going to be getting sexy with people. Part of the etiquette of getting sexy with other people is knowing when to run off and wash your hands.
Yeah. And maybe before you would get started too. Start with a hand washing.
Totally.
And maybe blank washing.
Yeah. And in Roman times, slaves would come around with a bowl and you'd wash your hands.
So you don't have like turkey drumstick in one hand and then go, grabbing someone's booty.
Picking up someone's ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You probably could, but it seems to me to be terribly déclassé.
That's
Really?
It's French for not classy.
Yeah. I caught on to that. Yeah, thanks, David. Well, David, it's an absolute pleasure having you on here. Thanks so much for coming in and enlightening me and everybody with your amazing vocabulary and your depth of insight and sharing that you've been a wonderful guest.
So I'm also an award-winning science fiction writer.
Wonderful.
You can find information about me at my website, daviddlevine.com, DAVIDDLEVINE.com, 2 D's in a row. And my probably my best known work is I have a trilogy of science fiction books, beginning with Arabella of Mars. And Arabella is a young woman in the 1800s in an alternate universe in which space is full of air, and it's possible to travel to Mars by sailing ship.
Wonderful. You write
That's
slut,
amazing.
You, David. Admit it.
I act
David.
Weirdly, and
yeah.
I barely ever write erotica.
Well, maybe that should be your next adventure.
I prefer to experience it.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. It's good. All right. David Levine, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you.
See you next Tuesday.
Was that an orgy?
Was it? It could be. Come on, David. Woo!
That felt like an orgy. Because don't forget, we have big cock here.
What are you gonna do? See the fever, baby, of my mind. I'm there beside you, no matter where you stop. I'll follow you to move.
We're done recording.
Shut now, eager beaver, baby. Eager beaver, baby. Well, what are you gonna do? Eager beaver, baby, of my mind.